All right, welcome to the party, pals. GRC Mafia. Right out of the gate, we're here to break down barriers, foster collaboration and community, working towards a more secure future for everybody. Definitely catch your badge. If you guys are not familiar, that information is in the live chat here. So you just join our Discord server. I'll go ahead and drop that link now. And then you put GRC Mafia in capital letters in our live chat channel. And then you unlock a hidden channel. And then also you get the GRC Mafia badge next to your name inside of Discord for the next week. That does reset each and every single week, though. Definitely, this is going to be more of a collaborative stream tonight. Usually our primary Thursday night meetings are. So here shortly during the presentation, I'll actually drop the stage link towards the end of it. So that way you guys can get into the backstage if you would like to. During this presentation, definitely drop your questions, any other topics that you want to add to it. And then we'll go into like an open panel, open discussion around AI in GRC and the MITRE Atlas framework itself. Definitely ask questions along the way, share resources, even if it doesn't pertain to exactly what we're talking about. Worst case scenario, we'll circle back around to that. And then also inside of our Discord server that I dropped, you guys can also share your personal LinkedIn profiles. The only way to send links is through the Discord server itself. Don't share anything that you don't want to be public. If you happen to do so, reach out to me on Discord, LinkedIn, or contact@studygrc.org. And then you guys may or may not be familiar with B-Dubs. So B-Dubs has BritWhite.io publishing a GRC cybersecurity related article every single Monday morning with a video talk through on it as well, which is awesome. And then has the ongoing CISSP study group that's covering 100% of the domain objectives live streamed on YouTube, hopping into VC after the live streams as well. Definitely check that out in the in the chat as well, cissp.britwhite.io, if you want to learn more about that. Plus, the really cool thing about the CISSP study group is it's free and it's beginner friendly as well. If you guys have any questions or otherwise, definitely drop that stuff in Discord. We have an entire category dedicated to just that. And then, of course, we have our website as well, which has some awesome information, including our resources page, too. Yeah, and so many familiar faces tonight. Josh, Regine, Space Tacos, Ben Tech, 8-Bit. Of course, we got Cam in chat already, grabbing his badge, too. Let's see here. And Space Tacos is here. If you guys weren't familiar, Space Tacos also has a Discord server called the GRC Audit Treasure Trove, which is an entire archive of resources that she's discovered for 2+ years now. Definitely worth checking out. And that Discord invite link is in the chat. And then I'm going to go ahead and transition over here and we'll get Cam up. Welcome to the party, pal.
Yeah, GRC Mafia. Let's go.
So you're going to give us like a little bit of a rundown about what MITRE Atlas is?
Yeah.
What we're expecting?
Yeah, kind of an overview, maybe a little bit of a high-level look at it. By no means an expert, but something that I was completely fascinated by. I think we all are fascinated by AI, and this is a really awesome framework. Just wanted to kind of introduce it to folks.
Bam. Kind of like what Jerry says, give it some love, I guess.
Yeah, give it some love and some praise. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you. Definitely drop your guys' questions throughout. I'll be marking them in the backstage. And towards the end there, I'll drop the stage link so you guys can get prepped in the backstage if you'd like to come up. Especially after the presentation, definitely going to be focused on MITRE Atlas or just AI GRC in general. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, GRC Mafia, excuse my puns and my dad jokes, but titled this, What in the World is MITRE Atlas? It's an AI framework that I've gotten kind of familiar with. And you may be asking, what in the world or who in the world are you? So my name is Cameron Gaudet. A lot of folks just call me Cam. Started into the cybersecurity studies and interests really fairly recently, back in September of 2023. Just a quick little bio about me. I'm a husband. I'm a dad. We all wear plenty of hats and have plenty of roles. Those are my two favorite. And relates to cybersecurity because shout out to my wife. Been incredibly supportive as I put resources and time and effort into these studies. And I know that's not always the case, but shout out to those of you who have that as well in your relationships, in your partner. Dad of 3 rambunctious little boys. They've taught me a ton about this, or on this journey in studying cybersecurity. The biggest thing was realizing that I want to be able to tell them to follow their interests and invest their time and work hard for their interests. And so that was kind of a motivating factor for me early on of doing the same. Also, there's plenty of risk assessments that I'm sure all of you have done. But then there's another level, which is giving 1-year-old twins a bath. So it was not an acceptable risk. We split them up. I'm a people-centric professional, and what I mean by that is I love people. When it comes to the cybersecurity, the thing that really drew me in was the people, processes, and technology, and those are things I love. I come from a background non-IT. It's millwright, general construction, some industrial equipment, and then kind of stumbled across GRC Mafia and fell in love. I love the vastness that cybersecurity is so vast. As just a general industry, general study. And GRC Mafia, or GRC is plenty vast in and of itself. So just really fell in love with that, fell in love with this community, and really got intrigued by MITRE Atlas. So what is MITRE Atlas? It is a threat-informed approach and framework from the folks at MITRE to understand adversarial threats against AI systems. That it's also an acronym, stands for Adversarial Threat Landscape for Artificial Intelligence Systems. And really what it is MITRE wanted to focus on building a framework or building a structure based on what we know to be actual attacks or what we know to be actual vulnerabilities. If you're familiar with the MITRE attack framework, this is very much based on that. But MITRE realized that there are things that are specific to AI systems, specific to AI operation or the way that AI works that might not have been covered by the attack framework. So this is complementary to and maybe above and beyond the MITRE attack framework. And we'll see that in a little bit. We'll kind of jump on their site and you can see some of the notations of that, in their setup, that kind of harkening back to the attack side of it. So the 3 different major factors that MITRE was looking at when they're creating this atlas: the AI access time, training and inference. These are all 3 main characteristics of an adversary's path of attacks. The training and inference training stage being the collecting of the data, the training of the model, the inference stages that once that model is deployed, right? So those are areas of attack. Whether you get a hold of the data at the beginning or once it kind of launches, once it goes that way. The AI access points, the digital or physical. The digital is like an API, right? That's kind of the digital side of the access points, and then the physical is when anytime it interacts, like anytime you and I use AI, anytime there's a user interaction with it, that's the physical aspect of that that access points. And then the system knowledge, what the adversary knows about the machine learning components, the amount of information an adversary can know about the components of the system. This diagram really helped me kind of understand that, the white box and the black box of that system knowledge. You can kind of see that broken down there with the training data, the algorithm, and the trained model. So these are the 3 main concepts of where the attack space, or where the attack surface rather, initiates, and kind of the basis for MITRE here. So what is it based on? What is MITRE based on? Real world attack data. This is the thing that I really, really enjoyed about kind of just dipping my toes into this, is it's based on actual attacks. So it's not just in theory, not just like good ideas or or common thought. It's stuff that's actually based off of actual attacks. Now, there's two different types of those. One is an exercise, so that's red teaming, kind of trying to break the system, and then obviously incident, which is an actual attack, like in the wild. And so that's what it's primarily based on, and focus of MITRE Atlas is that it's based on the attack framework model. There's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of things within an AI system that are, we'll call them standard cybersecurity measures or cybersecurity practices. So there is some of that overlap. The tactics and techniques matrix, the AI ML threat focus, you can kind of see that there. The life cycle integration I found incredibly fascinating. The Atlas framework aligns with that development life cycles for end-to-end security, including CRISP ML, which we'll kind of dive into just a little bit to kind of have that basis or foundation of kind of where these attacks come from, or where they originate, kind of chronologically, for an AI system. And then the community-driven updates. They at MITRE and Atlas are very, very keen on case studies and having the community at large weigh in on those things. They have, you can report kind of a case study, or you can report incidents which help them build this framework, build this library of information that makes up the Atlas framework. So that CRISP MLQ, so it's the cross-industry standard process model for the development of machine learning applications with quality assurance methodology. So basically, it breaks it down for the formation of ML systems, kind of on the development side of it, right? And the thing that I found fascinating about, the reason I wanted to kind of take a step back and see how these things are formed, like the process of creation, right, is I firmly believe that the more you know about what something is, the better you know how to defend it, the better you know how to secure it, right? So you can see this. There's 6 different life cycle phases: business and data understanding, data engineering, machine learning, model engineering, quality assurance and deployment, monitoring and maintenance. And it's really in that monitoring and maintenance phase that the process will then start to kind of return to the earlier phases. I really liked this flow chart on the maybe your right or left side of the screen. That phase, one of these phases, the business and data understanding, define requirements and restraints, initiate step and task, et cetera, et cetera. Because as I think about it, for like, how is this practically going to be used in GRC setting, or with a GRC mindset? And this is stuff that I think we're all really familiar with, these types of flow charts, or these types of questions being asked, and kind of determining where our status is on these things. So I found that just incredibly fascinating. I will include at the kind of end of this discussion, I'll include some of the resources, including like more information, a paper that was published on this CRISP ML. If you're interested, if like me, you kind of want to dive down a little bit of a rabbit path there, rabbit trail, and just kind of see, a little bit how the sausage is made, as it were. All right, so exploring the matrix. There are 15 tactics, 115 techniques, 26 mitigations, and 32 case studies so far. MITRE has partnered with, I think last I had seen, or one of the latest interviews I had listened to, MITRE's partnered with over 150 different partners. Some of those are government agencies. Some of those are industry leaders, in AI technology. Again, they really want to put an emphasis on, and I appreciate that, like the emphasis on the community-based nature of this, the community-based foundation for the MITRE Atlas framework here. And you'll see, you can just kind of, we'll jump on the actual website here, but you can kind of see the the different red ampersands. In fact, let me let's do this. Let me see if I can try to hop on. There, is that working? Yeah, we got it. Okay. Maybe. Bear with me here. Okay. So let me know if this isn't coming through real clear. But this is the Atlas MITRE website, right? So see the full Atlas matrix. You can see, we kind of zoom in here a little bit. You can see how much this looks like the attack setup, right? The MITRE attack, if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with the MITRE attack framework, I'm not going to dive into a lot of it right now, but there is, I know for a fact, there is a Try Hack Me room that's dedicated to it, to the MITRE attack framework, which is really phenomenal. It was kind of my basis or my foundation of even learning like what the heck is MITRE attack. But you can see here the different tactics and techniques. The tactics kind of being the what, the techniques obviously being the how. And we'll show a couple different things on here. One of the things I wanted to pop in is just to look at some of these. So these are the red ampersand are techniques that line up one for one with the attack framework. So if you're familiar with it, you'll have noticed, that there might be some familiarity with that. Some of these others that don't have that are the ones that have been created specifically for AI ML systems, kind of added on to the framework, the attack framework, as it were. So let's just grab, I'm just going to do this one. Initial access, the techniques evade AI model. And you can see just clicking right into that kind of gives you a summary of it. Craft adversarial data that prevent an AI model from correctly identifying its contents. This is where we jump into the case studies and kind of how this came to be. So we'll just pop in. This one's really fascinating. You all might have heard of this, the camera hijack attack. I think it was 2018. I believe it was in China. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically people took attack actors took static photos that they had gathered or purchased on the dark web and animated them so that they could bypass facial recognition software, got into some tax systems, sent out tons of invoices for so-called clients, and over the course of 2 years collected $77 million. I think 2018 to 2020 is when they were eventually, kind of found out or caught. But that one's really quite an interesting story. And if we click into that, we can see kind of that breakdown. I'm going to go here for Microsoft Edge AI evasion. So this is a case study. You can see up here in the corner, it'll tell you if it's an exercise or an incident. So exercise meaning, red team, something that they were trying to break. Incident obviously being like attack, kind of originated attack from a threat actor there. The Azure red team performed a red team exercise on a new Microsoft product. So just kind of wanted to show this. It shows you through step by step the procedure. And if you were to issue, like an offering of a case study for MITRE Atlas, this is what they kind of ask for. They ask for kind of the step by step. This was done. This was done. This was done. Using the publicly available version of the ML model, the team started sending queries and analyzing the responses from the ML model. And it kind of walks you through step by step what transpired in this case study. You can download the data. The thing I thought was really cool from this is this navigation layer. So I'm going to show you guys this view on Atlas Navigator. So this shows you within the MITRE attack framework where this technique or this case study, how it affects. Oh, just kidding. Now are we seeing it? Now we're seeing it. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Shout out to Chris. It shows you kind of where with this case study would touch basically within the framework. And it just, you can kind of see it through here. You can kind of get back into it, view technique by right-clicking, view tactic, obviously the AI model access. And we'll just click back over to this. Actually, we're going to go here. All right. So I thought that was really cool. The navigation layer where it kind of maps it out across that attack framework. You can kind of see all the different tactics and techniques that specific case study touches, right? All right, so heading back into the matrix. Red pill or blue pill? Let's grab another one here just to kind of show you through it. And if anybody wants to see more of this, we can do obviously a bunch more of this in the Q&A side of it. I would just go in and start kind of playing around with it. Personally, that's what I did. I didn't have a lot of knowledge going into it. So I was probably a little slower as far as like carefully reading and understanding. Some of this stuff might be more familiar to some of you there. Let's see here. There was one, cloud service and discovery, familiar one from the attack framework. So again, it kind of walks through what what it actually is, summary of it. Let's see here, case study, LLM jacking. So this was an incident, not a exercise. This SysDig threat research team discovered malicious actors utilized stolen credentials to gain access to cloud-hosted large language models. You guys don't need me to read the screen. So it could target a broad range of cloud services, including basically most of the cloud services you've heard of. That the worst case financial harm for unauthorized use could be up to $46,000 a day. This is updated as of April 2025. That's why I wanted to pull this one. This attack is ongoing and evolving. And again, it kind of walks you through it. It lists to the CVE, and it just walks you through those steps. The thing I thought was pretty cool. Where was this here? All right. Let's go back. Yeah, so if you want to go, here's the attack reference. So for instance, this one doesn't have the nice clean, here's a case study, here's a mitigation, right? As of April 2025, it's still ongoing. They're still trying to kind of get through it. But as we look at this Atlas attack, and I look at it as far as like, okay, how does this relate to potential GRC roles? This is telling you what needs to be included, right? This is telling you if you're going to create an AI policy, what needs to be involved. If you're going to, list potential or possible incidents or attack surfaces, like where do you even start? This gives very good like detail of like, if you have this, here's an instance where that was exploited. And I love that. Like that's a very practical use. So again, this type of mitigations, this type of attack technique cannot be easily mitigated with preventive controls since it's based on the abuse of system features, but some of the detection possibilities. And that was all right within here. So right here at that attack reference area, it's all linked together. And I found that to be really beneficial for someone trying to figure things out, just how it's all interconnected, how it's all kind of linked up there on the Atlas site. Another thing, if you want to just go straight to it, is you can just look at all the techniques, and search for certain ones, or hey, I need to know about this, like let's let's go look for that specific one. It's really organized quite well. Mitigations, same thing. You can filter by category. So I'm creating an AI policy. What do they have for mitigations, perhaps to include in an AI policy here? And then if you want, this is where I was saying build a case study. If you were to come across something, if you're a developer and you come across something, or just experience something, like I keep saying, out in the wild, you can explore case studies. I think they kind of list them, like most recent at the top, working the way down. So this one, malicious models on Hugging Face, just a ton of information in here. I will say, I know there's the NIST AI RMF, which has a lot of detail in it. There's a bunch of other frameworks that are kind of up and coming as well, or not up and coming, but developing. Right? None of this is set in stone. MITRE Atlas is not set in stone. This technology is evolving. I like this part of it where we can be a little bit proactive with some of our security decision making, but it's going to keep changing. It's going to keep broadening. It's going to go from 115 techniques to twice that, probably fairly soon. That's not inside information. I just know how quick this technology is moving for use cases, and so I think that's going to showcase in just different incidents coming. But these are tangible steps, and I guess what I was getting at was I think MITRE Atlas is the most I say mature framework. I would say robust, but AI has ruined that word for me, so we'll say mature framework that I have come across anyways, as far as the amount of detail that goes into it, the mapping together with the attack framework, all these case studies, all this input from all these different partners that MITRE Atlas have. And so let's see, I'm going to go back into this. And so I just encourage everybody to try to play around with it. Try to familiarize yourself with it, but also glean what you need from it. Like, as far as if somebody's asking you questions at your organization about AI policy, about specifics of AI security and what that would look like for you and your organization, like the chances are that if anybody has an answer within the or to those questions, the chances are that it's probably here. In my opinion, at the very least. And I was thinking about it, like AI security often gets talked, analogy that popped in my head was it often gets talked a little bit like meal planning. If you're not one of the youngins or the youths, you probably have done a little bit of meal planning. I joke all the time, my kids just figure food shows up on their plate, right? But a lot of AI security talk is just like, we need food, very, very broad, very, very general, or maybe like very, very specific. Like Tuesday we are having, beans and rice. But this kind of and maybe it's a crude analogy, but this kind of gives the full like meal planning of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, lunch and dinner covered. Here's our groceries. We go to the store and we purchase these items off the shelf, right? To me, that's what this gives you as a security professional, as a GRC analyst or professional or lead, trying to create these things, because it can often feel, especially in AI security, can often feel like you're just starting from scratch. And this gives you a foundation where I think you don't really feel like you're starting quite from zero there. So case studies, we talked about that a little bit. Exercise versus incident, I think that's fairly self-explanatory. The case studies were included. This was on their site as well, but at least one of the following: range of attacks like the evasion, the poisoning, the model replication, range of personas. So an average user, security researchers, might be included on it. That would categorize there. Range of machine learning paradigms, attacks on different machine learning as a service, machine models hosted on the cloud, and then range of use cases, which is a AI system used in both security sensitive applications like cybersecurity, as well as non-security or non-sensitive applications like maybe chatbots, right? The other thing I did want to talk about, and then I'll kind of bring this to a close. We can just kind of have open discussion, which I'll be honest is the part I was looking forward to the most about this. I just hear myself rambling, right? I'm very interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this, on AI security in general. But one of the things that MITRE finds very important, or has emphasized as I was kind of researching some of this stuff, is AI assurance. If you take nothing else away from this entire talk, there's a link that we'll share for a document on AI insurance. And I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm just going to read it verbatim. MITRE defines AI assurance as a process for discovering, assessing, and managing risk throughout the life cycle of an AI-enabled system so that it operates effectively to the benefit of its stakeholders. And I think this is what I really see kind of we'll say the future to be, like when we're talking about security or AI security, is like that kind of trustworthiness, being able to establish that assurance, that confidence in the life cycle of an AI. So I love flowcharts. They have this one in there, discover assurance needs, characterize and prioritize risk, evaluate risk, manage risk, and kind of that process there. And we're organizational integration, just kind of steps we can take from MITRE Atlas. The identifying vulnerabilities, the threat detection and response, risk management, compliance and regulatory alignment. Obviously, in the States, we have less of the regulations in place or the hard and fast rules. And it's a lot more voluntary frameworks or frameworks like MITRE Atlas. But your organization might adhere to those. And then obviously you have the HIPAA, if you do anything with Europe, as far as the AI Act is now in effect, and the GDPR, some of these things touch AI compliance for sure. Standardized security practice, and then collective improvement and staying current. I plan to use, I'm not a practitioner at the moment. I plan to keep kind of playing around with MITRE Atlas and just honestly like checking back in on it occasionally too, because of these case studies, because of how it's built with these real world incidents or exercises. And we can, that kind of didn't turn out super great on that slide, but just some resources that I kind of come across as I put this together. Atlas Navigator, you saw that. I kind of like that, how it maps it out over like the Atlas framework within the attack framework. There's GitHub. There's a bunch of GitHub articles and such there. The AI Security 101 is a really fascinating document I came across. That bottom one, that AI Assurance, really, really, really love that. Really highly recommend that read. I thought that was really fascinating. Just some other information. It was kind of based on the NIST Dioptra, if I'm saying that right. I thought was interesting. It's an open source software test platform developed by NIST, basically to trust or to assess the trustworthiness of AI or ML systems. I don't know how far along that process is. Maybe maybe Chris or PBO. I know you guys are much more up to date on this stuff. Can weigh in on that. But I thought that was fascinating. Like something putting things in place where we can test basically the trustworthiness of AI systems. I know I've seen a lot of people of late, kind of doing that themselves. Like, hey, this model hallucinates less than this one or whatever. But like to have some sort of standard or idea would be really awesome. So that's pretty much all from me. Come on up, guys. Like, come on and join myself. Ask your questions. Come on up and answer questions if you would like.
I think I'll just stick in the backstage and listen to you talk for another 40 minutes. I think we're good.
Is that
So the open stage, so definitely an open stage, open discussion. If you guys have any questions regarding this or just AI in general in regards to GRC, etc., we could talk about that more. You guys are definitely encouraged to come up here on stage. You can also drop it in chat as well. One of the things I was going to mention here is I'm going to share my screen. So NIST did release their AI thing like 2 years ago, but I believe they did recently publish their like version 2 basically just like a week or two ago for the AI framework, because one of the biggest issues is that it's just moving so rapidly. And I think that's one of the big issues. And so MITRE, I believe, is like the first one that's been able to actually compile an entire framework together that's actually beneficial and extensive. And one of the cool things about this is, so this is the diagram. So page 16 on this document for the AI framework 100-1. Awesome, love NIST and so forth. But also they are doing a much better job with their diagrams. And so this is the AI lifecycle stages, which is, it's just one of several really cool diagrams in here. Definitely highly recommend to check it out. It's only 48 pages in length, and if you wanted to, I can go ahead and pull up the draft as well. But some really great information in here too. I think that MITRE is just more extensive at this current point in time. And another thing to mention too is that the majority of the stuff in these frameworks are if you're like self-hosting an AI, is what most of it's directed towards. Like you could test ChatGPT for an example, but you don't have full access and ability typically when you work with that kind of stuff, unless you're, spending big bucks. The big money, stuff that like PBO talks about all the time. But more self-hosted, custom AI and things like that is what a lot of this is directed towards.
Yeah, and I really like just how it felt like to me like this Atlas framework was just a wide net cast, and then just like kind of piecing, like I got this piece, into this framework, which I just thought was really cool, especially built on kind of real life studies. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like any of these other frameworks we talk about as well. Like you were showcasing, we have controls that we have to follow. It mentions, what the hell could go wrong, and this is what you do about it. Check for this, and if this is truth, then you should do this.
Right.
So yeah, and it seems like MITRE Atlas is way more extensive at this current point in time. The new draft for the AI framework from NIST though is directed towards NIST CSF 2.0 for mapping. So that is one of the different advantages with that.
Yeah.
But there's another article here as well. So from Risk Connect, I'll go ahead and drop this in chat. This I thought was a pretty good article. I'm not even sure how old this is. It's got to be relatively new. Integrating AI into GRC, and it basically walks through and talks about how AI is getting integrated regardless, whether we like it or not, whether it's ChatGPT or in Excel, and it still has hallucinations. It has all kinds of different potential issues. There was a really good keynote. I believe it was the exiting keynote for Wild West Hacking Fest in Denver. And they were talking about, hacking Copilot. So Copilot is very, very common within organizations that are on the Microsoft Azure side of the table. And there are so many different issues with that. So like they were given an example, like you could literally type in your name and be like, oh, is there any termination documents or plans for Chris Whitlock? And then if permissions are not set up properly or otherwise, then there is a potential that the AI responds back and actually gives you a link to the document or the plans to dissolve your role. And that actually happened at an organization that they gave an example for.
Wow.
So, yeah. Josh, a lot of companies have been positioning their products as AI security focused or protects your AI. I wonder how many reference this or if their tools are actually adding much above it.
I will say second only to the amount of information that MITRE Atlas has. The second thing that probably shocked me the most in this research is how few people are referencing it. I mean, I know that there probably are some. I'm not crazy familiar with a bunch of them or a bunch of instances, Josh. But yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think if I were creating a product, I would want it. I'd probably want it to be tied to some framework, especially something like this. But it's a really good question. I haven't seen a lot of it.
Well, and it's also worth to mention too that High Trust has added on a entire category for AI as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean it's definitely concerning as far as like the AI security tools and stuff come along. I shared before. I think it's called like DropZone.ai, and they have the SOC Analyst AI. I think it was around $36,000 a year for like round the clock, and then you get X Mini. I think it was like 2,000 investigations or something along those lines. I would not be surprised if they've upped their prices by now. But like for an example, you're literally giving that AI full access to all of your server logs and your SIM and everything. And then if you want to take full advantage of it, then you also have to give it permissions to make changes and block IP addresses and things like that too, to take automated actions against a potential of what it deems could be a threat.
Right.
Which of course we know that AI hallucinates and everything else and whatnot. So who knows what could happen? But yeah, I mean it's the same thing with like with ChatGPT. I don't really have too much trust in it. So I think the only way you can really trust it is if you're running it 100% local.
Yeah.
Air gap that from the internet. Especially if you're working with anything sensitive, like that's your options.
Yeah.
8-bit probably is, has some air gapped cloud at home somewhere.
For sure.
I have not heard any of them actually reference a framework that they map to, though.
Same.
They always say that they have SOC 2, though, like that means something. But even PBO says boo NIST CSF. Wow, that is a shame, PBO. Wow. I would say the same about 53, but I care for my life. I don't need PBO coming up throwing hands with me or anything.
No one's trying to get throat punched. Oh.
Yeah. I'm just going to be live streaming one day and PBO is going to come kicking down my wall.
It's like through this side of the camera, coming in the room.
Quarterback. Yeah, let me drop this link because I thought this was a pretty interesting article. There's a lot of information out there. I've mentioned OCG for GRC and AI usage. There as well. Oh, looks like I disconnected for a moment there, but. So why did you go down this entire rabbit hole on Atlas?
I wanted to find something that was tangible, like something I could kind of wrap my hands around when it comes to AI security. I think everybody agrees that it's the future. Like, it's here, but it's also the future. And I started looking into different frameworks of like, okay, how do we get our hands around this? Like who's doing something to get our hands around it? And that's legitimately how I stumbled across MITRE Atlas, and then just kind of got pulled down that rabbit trail.
Have you done any other training or otherwise? Like, are you looking at being like a GRC AI specialist of some sort, or?
I would like to. Yeah, I would like to be. I haven't done any other training. I'm currently working towards Sec Plus, which I hope to have end of this month or at the beginning of next at the very latest. But there's also, like, I don't know. I've found that you kind of have to do a good bit of research on any sort of courses being offered for AI security right now too, to try to validate their worthwhileness. But
see, my issue is like there's this generative AI course that's completely free from Free Boot Camp or Free Code Camp, and AI generative. But the problem is that it is 65 hours in length. So yeah, it's great that it's free and so forth, but a 65-hour course on YouTube is insane. And that's my biggest issue, is that there's already so much information out there in regards to AI. And especially from a GRC standpoint, that's like the hard part for me always, is that yes, you need to be technical, but you don't have to be overly technical. But the more you know, the better off you're going to be.
Right.
It's the same thing with, especially with AI, with so many different things out there. How are you going to be talking to your development team who's in charge of this or otherwise, these engineers, if you don't know what the hell they're talking about
Right.
and how it works?
And that's to be 100% honest, that's where I've gone. I just come across something today on like learning more about LLMs. Like I kind of want to focus on learning that side of it. Because even MITRE Atlas is a great example of this and how it kind of overlaps the attack framework. You know, you can kind of build some of the cybersecurity things into the AI ML side of it, if, to your point, if you know what the heck, how it operates, like what it is. So I would probably be looking next at more of like understanding, like deep learning on ML rather than maybe like an AI security. But some of that's too, just I haven't found any courses that promote AI security that I thought were incredible. But 65 hours sounds great.
It's supposed to be a very thorough course. Like, you'll be building your own AI bots and so forth throughout this as well. And they have all of the timestamps in the description as well, which is useful. I watched like maybe the first 3 or 4 hours already. I think it's great. I mean, like the first hour and a half is just like introduction to the course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my hard part. There's already so much information out there. And I dropped this in chat as well. I mentioned it recently as well. What about you, PBO? You upskilling to become an AI GRC specialist?
No. Great presentation. There's just a lot into it right now. You caught me chewing.
Yeah, we're getting in the way of PBO's dinner here.
No, yeah, I just been kind of focusing more on the flow of data to build the ML, right? Because you're talking about poisoning. So from a cloud perspective, keys and encryption, making sure you're getting your data from the website you're thinking about, right? Then, like you brought up governance, saying what you can run in the data, saying what you can search in the data. So that's kind of what I've been kind of researching. Like you said, the next big part is the LM, the large language models itself. I've just been trying to make sure I protect the data to build them on. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, well, and then also 8-Bit has a really good mention here, too, on very little promoting of AI security out there. I think we see that all over the place, though, too. When somebody's developing a tool or trying to sell you something, they're typically not mentioning the security to you, especially if it's new. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, yeah, we implemented this 155 controls. We got you covered here, 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 here. Unless it's government or you have to have those requirements.
Governments, they probably, they always last to use it. I know a lot of big organizations not letting you use generative AI. So
I did hear that the government's been working on their own internal. It's probably going to be Grok at this point, but
probably.
Yeah, no worries, Josh. Thanks for popping in and so forth. I'm just going to let Cam talk for the last hour, and PBO can take a nap after his dinner here. No, great presentation there, Cam.
I appreciate it.
And then I got to pull up your LinkedIn as well. You guys should really connect with him.
Oh, yeah. Feel free to
not
connect.
to mention his YouTube channel as well. There's also another important mention I wanted to do here, too. Let me go ahead and pull this open. So for all of you GRC Mafia, don't forget to grab the badge tonight. But then also, if you get the badge, you unlock the Badge Hunters channel, which that resets every single week. So you have to show up and get your badge. But then also, let me pull this open so that way I can actually explain what the hell I'm talking about. Might be a little bit easier. I shared this with you guys a while ago in regards to, I mentioned how we put everything into a database for all of our streams and so forth. And like, I am very much anti-ad and paywalls, things like that, anything that makes it more difficult. And So literally what we've done is we've made an entire database of all of our live streams here. Each one includes, like you can see the one from earlier today. So post stream, what I do after every single stream is I go in and I add it into the database. I add the transcriptions and subtitles and the video. So if you guys wanted to, you guys can go to this database here, which is hosted through Notion. And then you guys have full access to the transcripts if you guys want to download that. If you guys want to watch the videos ad-free or even download the videos, the descriptions are in here. You can search the whole database for keywords if you wanted to. Over on the right-hand side here as well. There's the links for the YouTube if you wanted to watch it on YouTube instead, especially if you want to drop those likes and comments and so forth. But the main advantage here is so you could search not only all of our content, but then also you have offline access to it. You could download the transcription without having to use a third-party tool or otherwise, and throw that into AI or whatever you guys would like to do. So that's pretty much that. I'm dropping that in chat as well. You guys would have known about this last week if you guys had your badge.
Shots fired.
You're muted, PVO.
Yeah, I'm anti-badge. I think that's too much peer pressure, man. I'm anti-badge.
Wow.
That's too much pressure, man. The cool thing, though, is MITRE's so well respected. A lot of people build the MITRE framework. AWS Guard Duty is actually built on top of MITRE framework. So when it search your logs and hopefully your AI, it'll figure out those type of attacks. So, and we know Splunk, which costs $1 gazillion, they're built on top of the MITRE framework too.
Oh, everyone is saying it's secure, but question is how.
Yeah, I did a little video on that. Like we said, I talk about securing the pipeline to the LLM because that's how people trying to get malware to you, poison your stuff, and force it to hallucinate. So that's kind of what I did a video on that. Once again, keys, encryption, make sure you get IPs from where you're thinking the data, just your normal stuff. And and a MITRE attack, make sure there's nobody's in your network trying to get your stuff. So
right.
I didn't even know you did a video on AI, PBO.
I got about 3 or 4 videos, man. PBO is a visionary, man. He's our future. No, I'm joking. I do got 3 or 4 because I did the RMF AI 100. So he just dropped some gems. So I probably do one on the 200 now since it's out there. And I did the AWS flow to it. Of course, I might not name it AI. I need to do better with my keywords. So yeah, I've done a couple of them.
I was going to say on 8-Bit's comment there, I was trying to shop around an idea of some sort of kind of locally hosted AI service, which is basically like pull stuff out of a blueprint. I've got a construction industrial background. So basically you could upload a blueprint and it would pull out the information that you specifically need to make your quote, create your quote. Long story made short, in a couple of the places I've talked to about this, I'll ask what type of security measures or controls would you be including? And my favorite one was I got, oh yeah, all the security. That's that's great, but specifically, like name one specific thing. Yeah. So.
Well, I guess that would be the advantage of the high trust certification for AI is then you can, you have some type of evidence for it, right? Like your SOC 2. I think SOC 2 needs to add some AI, certification on maybe, some verification, right, PVO?
I'm sure there's some out there.
If there isn't, there's going to be. But I think also 8-Bit's really trying to dig into on the, like, especially if you're doing local LLM, how the hell do you actually secure it? And I mean, that's the difficult part there. Because like ChatGPT, for an example, has openly stated on the fact that like once it's learned something, it's not like they could just go in and extract that and remove it. It's there. Like they can't completely rebuild from scratch. PBO keeps muting himself.
No, facts. And that's what people try to put in policies, not to put your company PI in there, but most people do it anyway.
I wonder if Sony's software is still out there in ChatGPT world.
Shout out to Sony. They attacked my man Kevin Hart. So shout out to Sony.
Oh
They
gosh.
they caught him greedy.
Oh, hold on. Here we are.
Caught him greedy.
Damn.
Shout out to but now like honestly, like I said, from 8-bit, securing the data that builds the LLM. Once again, that's kind of what I was kind of focusing on. Because once you start getting into hallucination, I don't think that's a GRC issue, but I could be wrong with that.
Well, it becomes a GRC issue when, like, let's say I go off and I use ChatGPT to make a keynote talk, about study GRC. Mm-hmm. And then in that keynote talk, it starts talking about a genocide in South Africa or something. And,
keep going.
And then that becomes a reputational risk.
Yeah, but for me, and chime in if I'm wrong, is GRC is not responsible for building the LLM. Now, if I let some data poison it, like you said, I think that's us, because we should be using keys and make sure you're talking about the analytics of the LLM. That's not us. Well, now, if somebody poisoned it because it got wrong data, that's us. We should have put some protection. I don't even think that's us. That's really security ops. But I'm with that family. But you're talking about the inner workings of LLM. That's not us. But chime in. I could be wrong. I'm getting old. I could be wrong on that.
So, I see what you're saying. I get that aspect, but also at the same time, I think a large portion of that, like especially when it comes to hallucinations, for an example, I do believe that does track back to GRC in the aspect of user awareness, especially user training. That's a level of security awareness at that point. That could be a risk to the organization if they don't realize there's so many people who don't even use AI still. And if they do, they barely do.
I'm with you. I don't think the education of the whole company follows with GRC, but I'm old and grumpy, man. I think you young and feisty. I'm not trying to take on any extra responsibilities that aren't mine.
So
go ahead.
Let me ask you. So do you think that companies that have AI available, like Spotify, for an example, that they should implement some type of security awareness training around AI in their awareness training? Yes. Like their annual trainings?
Yes, but we buy that from a company. We don't do it ourselves, but yes.
Who are we going to buy that from?
Before? There's a ton of companies out there. Yeah.
Sorry, James, but
we don't create the training awareness. We make sure it gets done and we check the box that they took it.
Yeah.
But I mean, chime in once again. I'm old and I'm a curmudgeon, man.
But so let me ask. So in the 850, where does it state that security awareness training needs to involve AI?
It's not in there. What it says is some general though. It's going to say you need to do training for security awareness, and I think part of that is the triad, right? Confidentiality and all that's going to be in there. And now since they're using AI, I think you got to have some in there, and I think that's going to be a compliance checkbox. Now, how well it gets trained and how well it gets disseminated through the org is not my responsibility. My job is to check the box.
Ooh, not your responsibility.
Facts, man. I'm old, man. I got in trouble for a lot of shit that wasn't mine in this life, man. I'm almost 60, man.
He was like, nah, I don't want ownership of this. Like,
that's everybody else's What's mine? I'll let 8-bit. He up there in the ranks, man. Me, I'm not taking on any extra responsibilities. My job is to say they took it and I checked the box. If they learn it, that's not my job, man.
Oh, gosh.
Chime in there, 8-bit. I'm on my soapbox, man.
Yeah, just real quick. I think your pushback here is the fact that I think you realize that the 853 is no longer the godfather with AI.
Oh no, we behind. No, hold on, let me be super specific. And while our government, we 5 years behind. We're not trying to do anything novel. We trying to take the basics and work with them, man. That's why the government is steady, man. We like IBM, man. We not trying to do no super duper AI like 8-bit and install it on my PC that connects to my Mac. We're not doing any of that, man. We need stuff to be running for 5 years and rock tested, man. We're not doing anything novel and elite. That's not what the government does, man. That's why we're behind.
All right, you all are welcome for the show. Now PBO's wide awake and doesn't need his nap just yet. So I left the disclaimer up on purpose.
Yeah, Kristen got me fired up. Jump in there, 8-bit. But that's my thought. The government's always 5 years behind, man.
No, I mean I agree. And I just wanted to go ahead and you know basically said what I was saying earlier that yeah, you're right about that one thing, Chris, is that everybody is advertising that their AI is secure and that I mean you see a whole bunch of programs popping up like even for your meetings, for like they'll take the notes for you, and I mean everybody's sitting there saying they're secure, but it's like Cam said, exactly what he said. It's like, oh, well, what kind of security controls are put in place? So everything. Well, what does that mean? And the thing is it's so new frameworks and stuff. People are like, well, do I do this, do I do that? And we're still looking at security for AI in an older sense, right, where it's like, oh yeah, maybe the API keys need to be stored away this way, or maybe you have to do something else. But there's no, I mean, besides what I saw today, which was really nice. That's a better foundation on frameworks for AI. But it's still such this new thing that it's kind of like the wild west on how to secure it, because everybody's saying that it's secure, but there's not a lot of content out there on how to secure it. To learn to secure it, to do it properly, what kind of frameworks. I mean, you don't have anything like that. It's just not being advertised if there is, because I haven't seen much of it. That now there's tons of content like this is how you build an AI. Hey, you could do this, you could do that. Great. Now, how do we lock it down?
The practical, actual hands-on. So like, great, we need to do this, but how do we actually make that happen? Is that what you're? Yeah,
No,
the
I
actual
mean,
practical.
yeah. Well, not well. I mean, the thing is, anybody can implement it. Anybody can make it work. But how do we
Mhm.
lock it down? I
Mhm.
mean, like security awareness training, for example. Teaching people, what to use or not to use. Right. That's like one control that we can put in, but and it's still fairly new. I mean, everybody puts it out there for emails. That's like a no-brainer, but there you don't really see. I mean, maybe they're implementing it a lot more these days on security awareness training. But then, when you're looking at all these, he's shaking his head no. But I mean, yeah. Um, but it's things like that that need to really start kind of being built out now, because locking it down, actually securing it, not just saying we're securing it, not just putting it behind a firewall or even air gapping it. It's like how do we move forward, not only train people on how to use it, but then how to use it responsibly, and then the companies need to figure out, like, when they're using their RAG models on their KD, how do they know it's not going to leak? Like you said, like somebody said, well, how do you know somebody's going to get terminated? And it could be exploited. And so having a deeper understanding and putting those controls in place, we just don't have a lot of that, and there's just not a lot of content out there onto doing that as well. I mean, they're just saying this is how you do it, that they're not saying this is how you secure it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My issue was Microsoft put out a tool. It was a small tool. I'm gonna think of the name of it, but it started showing you everything you had access to. Man, this thing was showing all kind of documents it shouldn't be showing. It was, and the thing I hate about Microsoft is they love giving you new features, but they don't let you opt in. They just start giving users these tools. We like, dude, we need to be able to do a security assessment. I'm gonna look at that, but so yeah, that's just
Well, you
that's
see,
hard in security.
you even have a problem even when the biggest players can't even go ahead and secure it properly, right?
Oh,
Whether it's
facts.
Microsoft or whether it's Facebook or whether it's Google. I mean, the thing is, people are constantly, going at AI, and yet, when you even have the big players, the guys who are actually creating this monster, can't even secure it properly themselves.
Mhm.
What are
Well,
your
I think
thoughts, Cam?
I was gonna say I think that's where, like, we were talking a lot about like the security awareness of it, or the user awareness. I think that affects a lot of these types of techniques. I think were discovered or made evident from just that, and kind of stressing the importance. There was one case study in here, and I can't recall which one it was. It'd be fun to pull up, but basically, you'd be looking for a source, and the model would hallucinate a site, and attackers were going in and basically trying to scrape those like dead links, and basically so that when a user clicks on it, they're clicking on a malicious link. Just because it's hallucinating and sending you to a non-existent link, like, you know. So all that to say, like, I do think that it's the security awareness, and there is a lot still to wrangle. You know, 8-bit, I totally echo the point of, like, even the big players don't seem to really have it fully locked down. You know, this kind of to me, it's like that has to improve, but also we can work on the stuff we do know. And some of that is like informing people, you know, within your organization, if you are using, you know, either a you know, locally sourced or one of these enterprise solutions, you know.
Yeah, I agree. That right there is a really good start. Is just educating people on it. You know, that's a
Yeah.
really, really good start.
It's not the end point, but it's a start. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and Brexy mentions, you know, throwing everything into their AI policy for, you know, who's responsible for the output and, you know, so forth. I'd be curious to know, like, how much of that is owned or managed by the GRC team or yourself or otherwise. Like, obviously you're making the policy itself, but are you also going through and doing those checks? Are you just sending a checklist to the engineering team? Or what do you mean? I'm curious on Braxy's side of it and so forth.
Yeah, that'd be. AI just cutting edge. I just don't see the teams keeping up with it. Go ahead. I just don't.
Oh no, yeah, I completely agree. I think the direction that it's heading is that AI is so expansive, and there's so much that's involved with it that eventually it's going to come down to the fact that you're going to have to specialize more into it, because it's just so broad and so forth.
Well, I think Cam gave you the blueprint. I think people can come up with better checklists and better tools to look at it, right? When we talk about the CIS checks and the STIGs, right? Those are just hardening. So what are those for AI? Right? If you make people try to become an AI expert, we toast. We ain't gonna never get there.
And now 8-bit's over there prompting AI to make him a Python script to apply STIGs to an AI model.
Yeah, which was
it's like, that's actually a great idea, PVO.
But you know, like too, you know, I tell people, if you give me a Windows box, I got 300 checks for you. They're gonna piss you off, and 10% of them is gonna break it. So we gotta figure out what's gonna work. But I have a blueprint to be able to do it. If you expect people to become an AI expert and make that happen, toast. That's never gonna happen. Of course, PBL's grumpy. Eating his McDonald's. He just messed up his whole diet, but he throwing out gems tonight, though. Shout out to me. I'm going out some good gems. What's your thoughts on that 8-bit? That's my theory. I could be wrong because I'm a commercial.
No, I mean, I think you're right when it comes to that. You can't expect everybody to become an expert on it. But you know, just like when it comes to like emails and stuff, you know, getting to actually know what you're looking at or being able to actually use an application, you know, eventually it's going to have to be the norm that you would have to know at least the bare basics of it and how to use it. And it kind of just reminds me of back in the day where even typing used to be a skill, whereas it's not anymore. It's just given, right? And so this is just the next step where, you know, when emails were first coming out, you know, I remember like Y2K and stuff like that, and how things were changing from there, and people had to learn email, like what an email is and how to identify it. It's just the next step, in my opinion. And then people are just that if you don't learn how to use it, you know, you're going to be left behind. And and I hate to say this, but that goes the same way with a lot of people with cell phones and computers. You know, in the 90s, you didn't need those things. These days, you can't do anything without it. So, I mean, it's just the next step in that next evolution in technology.
Something I'd like to mention there too is that there's been a whole issue around younger generations not knowing how to type on a keyboard in business, for an example, which is like dumbfounding to me because like I remember before touchscreens, they're so used to using their phones that many people don't even have computers except like when they have to for school. And so their typing speeds, if anything, are horrible. That's just like mind blowing. I talked to several people who were complaining about like, oh yeah, we hired all these people and they can't even type. They've never used a keyboard before. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah, I got the opposite problem. I was actually typing on a typewriter when I had to try to type on glass. That was so funny because I was used to the keys pushing back. So I had the opposite problem. I'm like, because I typed.
You legit had a typewriter.
For real. I mean, I took typing as a course because I knew I was going to become a programmer. They don't even have typing. But shout out to Brexy. I'm pushing back on Brexy. He said, which one of those? He thought I think there's a good argument for a hallucination of following the CIA triad for integrity. I disagree, but I disagree.
What?
I disagree.
How do you fight that, PBO? I'd love your reasoning.
It's the same reasoning is I make sure the data gets in there. We talked about that. There's a flow. I make sure the data doesn't get hacked. I have no control of the LMM modeling and how that's being built. I didn't program that. I don't touch that. The hallucination comes from the programming being wrong, correct? Unless the data gets poisoning, I don't think that would be hallucination. So, if, like a programmer, I don't. If he programs something in PHP or COBOL or something, I don't go in there and look at his code. I might give him some OWASP top 10 to make sure his validation don't get tore up, but I'm not in charge if he has a compile error. To me, hallucination is a compile error. Come up here, Brexy, and get some of this work, man. I'm fired up, man.
So my understanding is
Chris messed up my dinner. Come up and get some of this work. Go ahead, Chris. Get some of this work.
I'm gonna have to get that discllaimer back up.
I'm
gonna make a hotkey for it. I'll just change my F key to pull up PBO's.
With love, Brexy. No. As the kids say, no disrespect as I attack you. But now go ahead.
So no, like disrespect. With hallucinations, for an example, like Jack Scott did a really good presentation with ACI Learning, which is no longer a friend of mine. But
you got more enemies than me. Go ahead. You got more enemies.
Yeah, 1 out of 10 rating. But
violence.
Jack Scott is absolutely phenomenal, and it was about AI bias and fairness.
Facts. I'm all over
and
that.
She gives an example of like 4 or 5 different tools you could utilize to test different AI models for fairness and bias and so forth. And there's a lot more out there. Most of those, I believe, were open sourced. And so like that would be the checks and balances I could imagine is like, okay, we're going to run off of MITRE Atlas, right? We're going to go through and implement these different security controls and so forth. Well, for us to be able to utilize this, we want to have less than let's say a 3% hallucination rate or otherwise. There's tools out there to test for that. And so that would be just as same as running a Qualiscan equivalent. And then also the training side of the end users understanding what hallucinations are and that it happens. And it can affect the CIA triad in multiple different ways.
The reason I'm shaking my head is, and I get where you're going from is, if a financial program spits out a wrong answer, that's not a GRC issue. That's a financial model issue. To me, I'm going to get out there, put up my banner is, if I want to skew the data on purpose, it's not my job to correct it. They skew data on purpose, man, to get people to vote the way they want, to get resolutions and do stuff illegal. It's not my job to catch the company and call that out, Chris. That's not my job. Now, if the data gets corrupted, if the data gets messed up, if something happens, but once it gets in the model, I don't think that's us. Now, I think what Jack Scott's saying is, I think what 8-Bit said, they're becoming professionals in LLM. To me, that's outside of GRC. But once again,
But it's not when you look at it from the risk management standpoint, though.
That's not risk. If the company wants that to be biased, that's what the company wants. It's not. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that's a GRC perspective. I don't think that's a GRC call. But I
find that amazing.
Why? That's a business. That's a business decision.
The part that I find amazing is the fact that very surprising here is that you seem to not think to look at hallucinations or the output of an AI as a risk to the business organization that would be claimed to GRC.
It is no, I think it's a business risk. It's not a GRC risk. If you run I worked at a Fortune 500 insurance company. When the models came out, I looked at it and thought it was wrong. I'm not chiming in on that.
So, like in a business, if they're having an issue with their AI that says, 20% of it is hallucinations, or this user had this AI output all of this information from our SharePoint with Copilot, that wouldn't be pushed back to risk management to see what could be resolved. To me that's just statistical analysis on your business side. But once again, I could be looking at it wrong. To me, I think the LMM part stays in the LMM.
you trying to take the risk of programming an LMM. Why would I do that? And two, the people that are doing that, it's going to be super small.
I would equate it to like with application development, you have your dev teams and then you also have your DevSecOps.
Facts.
But that's also where, our understanding matters on how that functions. So that way we could provide insights for the remediations.
For me, security is a wide knowledge. I could go on AWS and says, these are the best practices for AWS. I can go to MITRE and say, Azure and says these. You're going to go to an LMN for a financial model and chime in on that? Mm-mm. But once again, I could be wrong. To me,
well, and that's where I see it becoming more of a specialty, just like with Jack Scott's and so forth. Is her specialty is GRC, and then she bolted on all that knowledge with AI to be able to talk.
We can say that, but to me, you dealing in the 1%. When I talk GRC, I'm talking about fundamentally as a domain. So to me, if I'm talking about fundamentally as a domain, I'm not stepping my foot in my toe because 95% of people are not going to be able to do that. Right now, I'm a developer, so I stick my toe in there. But to me, I'm talking about 95% of the GRC domain. You like everybody got LMM knowledge.
And I find this hilarious because PBO is pushing back saying that, it's their problem. But then Evan, who's like blue teamer, is pushing back and saying, no, it's GRC.
I mean, we can disagree. And like I said, I think our age is it. Sometimes I'm not stepping my toe in that. That's an accident way. But like I said, I see what he's saying. I mean,
no, I understand. And we all know that.
He gave me love. Look at the top
too. So like,
get the top
in one organization, they may have a GRC person who's closer netted with the AI team or otherwise. But that, I think, is the other issue, is that there's not standardization like that yet.
But see, that's an outlier. Like, I jump in on Oracle programmers and I be throwing punches with the Oracle DBAs because I did it for a decade. But for me, the average GRC person, you're not going to step into that. But once again, y'all chime in. I'm on my soapbox and punching Brexy because I like him and kicking Chris underneath the table.
That kind of sounds like back in like 2016 when GRC said that supply chain wasn't our issue.
Well, but I guess for me, once again, there's big standard pipelines in the supply chain. I mean, I did my toe on legal. I put the security addendum, or like when we read that terms and conditions, right? A lot of GRC people are going to check, but to me, that's a well-defined. I can get a security exhibit. Supply chain, we talking about movement of data, those are pretty big standard domains. To me, LMM is so special. And I think Brexit gave me a little bit of love. He said, the LMM cannot be controlled. PBO is right. Shout out to me. Give me a right. But but like I said.
You're going to stop now.
No. But like I said, I see where you're coming from. Once again, I try to protect the pipeline, everything till it gets into the element, to the large language model. And for me, I'm sure there's some low-level checks, but you're talking about some unique skill set. So I'm trying to figure out what would you be trying to GRC-ing? I'm gonna make it a verb in an LMM.
Well, the whole point is that governance, risk, and compliance. We have to mitigate the risks as much as we possibly can.
We're controlling the data. We're not making sure it's getting polluted. We're doing keys. We're making sure all the data gets to the LMM. We're responsible for that. PBO gonna take all that and want all that smoke. But once it gets into the LMM, I'm not in charge of hallucination. To me, that's a business function, like statistics.
No, and I'm not saying that GRC would be responsible.
That's what you said. I'm yelling at you. That's what you said. Cam, is that what he said? Is that what I put him in it? That's what
I saw
mitigate it.
Right. I saw that as the hallucinations, like dealing with that happening, like on the business side of it, not necessarily the fact that it had, not like how it occurred, but that it did occur. Would wind up being a GRC issue, if that makes sense. Like, yeah,
but to me, why though? We don't have any programming skills in the element, so I'm trying to figure out how we taking that on.
So do you think that the future would just be AI engineers and just dissolve the GRC team then for risk?
See, now you clowning. See, now you poking at me now. Now, see, I'm Green Pink. I'm gonna say what I said. Our responsibility, because you got to have the data to train on it. Without the data, it sucks. Mm-hmm. So my job is to get it to 8-bit because he gonna do his thing. He's self-hosting. he running 95 GPUs or whatever they doing over there. Once it gets in there, that's 8-bit. That ain't got nothing to do with me. So if 8-bit don't do the LMM right and the hallucination, you bring the GRC for that?
Hey,
I'm
real
calling
quick, 8-bit. Do you even need to use your heater in the wintertime, or you just your own self-hosted cloud?
Good point.
Luckily, I haven't. Well, I mean, that's a good question, actually. I'm not sure. I mean, the room I'm in now does get a little warm, especially during the summers. It gets really warm from the rest of the house, but the winters, it's hit and miss.
Yeah. I think Evan really hits it on the nail here, is that it's not all just a GRC issue, but I think still that consultation is still involved. So for mitigation.
One of the things I wanted to hit on, because we were talking about when it comes down to hallucinations, and I kind of have to agree a little bit more with PBO here, because it would be coming down to the people that are actually managing the LLMs, and when you actually teach people not only how to use it, like when you look at ChatGPT, for example, and you'll have like a bunch of different chats on the side, and depending on how big those chats are, and what is the when you start messing with things like the temperature, or how creative you want it to be, or how precise it wants to be, or how long you want your chats to be, it can give you better answers on the short term. That's the reason why sometimes it's people are asked, like, hey, don't make these little chats real gigantic, because then they'll really start to hallucinate, because they don't really have a really good memory. So I mean, the thing is, it'll come down to how would you expire these chats, how you would go ahead and you know get their memory in tuned to go ahead and not hallucinate very much.
Now,
yeah.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that, and I think that's a great example. But wouldn't that be like the checklist that GRC would be handing to the engineers for the temperature and the chat history and the context, and developing the awareness program?
I think part of it, yeah, but then when it starts screwing up, it's going to be really down to the engineers. Like I said, it's still in the infant stages, right? Whether we're talking about security awareness training, or what are best practices with it, especially for end users. But I mean, right now, as I see it, it comes down to the engineers working on them, or the people that does the coding. But I think eventually, just like a lot of other things, GRC will be involved at some point. But when it comes down to like what PBO is talking about, I kind of have to agree with him on that, as it stands right now. But
But
that
what
could
is that exactly that you're agreeing on?
that it's not his problem.
that the hallucination output is not his problem.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to the engineers. I mean, like I said, they can probably put in best practices on how people to use it, but depending on the business, I guess, how, like, some of those controls that I just talked about, how you'd have to fine tune, that's going to be up to the engineers, and what the business wants to do. It's like you said, if PBO said, hey, if the business wants to be more creative in this way, they can tune that for the LLMs. So I mean, I can't say for sure myself, but I mean, I think as it stands right now, I think PBO is correct in that it's really not going to be his problem. It's going to be falling on the engineers. But like I said, eventually, I think as we start to learn more and more on how to secure AI, GRC is definitely going to be a lot more involved, and I agree with you also on that, Chris, that it's going to have a specialty at some point.
Look at him trying to be neutral here.
No. Well, things change. I mean,
no.
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a great example that you gave, like with ChatGPT, on the history and the temperature and so forth. So, like, the lower the temperature, then the less that it's creative. It doesn't make up as much.
Right.
So like the way that I see it being like the cycle that I would imagine is we would tell them like, hey, the temperature needs to be X, you know, the context would have to be X, you know, the hallucination, you know, benchmark would have to be, you know, less than 10% or whatever it is within those
Right.
means.
Yeah.
And then if it comes out that there's a problem, then obviously that would fail. And then we would again have to address that and be like, hey, you know, this didn't pass. What can we do about it? Figure out the solutions or otherwise. And I guess that's where it would be more of a consult type of thing to an extent, and understanding how they function and some of the stuff involved with it, such as benchmarking. That's why I think that, you know, still GRC is involved with that. And I do still see it as a business risk, because that is, if a business says, hey, I want 20% hallucinations, I'm going to be like, why? Why? What?
I'm going to tell you what he told me. I'm going to tell you what he told me. That's how we make money.
Oh,
I was in a meeting because me and Dwight had the same conversation about privacy. They was giving up too much information. And I asked the VP, I was like, you think that's too much information? He goes, that's how we make money. Do you want to get paid? PBO, shut the hell up. So,
well, like a great example of that is like what the New York Times recently started allowing their editors to start utilizing AI content, but they under strict circumstances and so forth. Like you have to actually mark it as AI and et cetera. But like in those kind of scenarios, or writing a book, for an example, you would want it to be more creative, or brainstorming ideas and things like that. So that's where you could get into where you want more of that. But yeah, it's a sketchy world out there. When like,
yeah, and when you tune it to be more creative too, it's more prone to have mistakes. You know.
Facts.
So I mean, you know, having those kind of restrictions, like, you know, if you wanted to be more precise, obviously you wanted to go off like a RAG model because you're going off a, you know, a KB. But then, you know, if you're responding to an email and you're trying to have, you know, AI help you write that, you want it to be more creative. So I mean, there's a balance that goes to it right now, and you know, finding that balance, just not sure.
Oh, and also Brexy mentions Azure AI Foundry, and at the end of this, he mentions a policy in there that controls hallucinations. I think that's an important mention too, is that a lot of these different platforms that you can utilize, especially, they'll have AIs in stages. So you submit your input, and then that AI generates its response, or even sanitizes yours in a format, or make sure that you're not asking, you know, to do something you shouldn't be doing. And then before it responds back to you, it goes through another AI model, or more than one, to check to make sure that it's, you know, work appropriate, that it fits certain categorizations, that it doesn't have sensitive data in it, you know, things like that.
Another thing too I'd like to add as well is prompt engineering. You know, also in the background when it comes to the thing is, like, a lot of people don't actually give that a lot of thought, and some people think prompt engineering is just how you interact with the AI. But the thing is, there's also something on the background that has prompt engineering. So, and I'll give you a good example where I work currently. The the main doctor where I'm at, he actually created the AI so that way he can read out. He had AI read out EEG scans and stuff like that. He showed me how important prompt engineering on the back end, not just the front end, but also on the back end is. And he made just a simple adjustment where it's like, it shows him everything that was proper, showing with the scans and everything else. He goes, but what if I wanted to make it rude? Or what if I wanted to do this? And then so he just changed a few words in the prompt engineering, and not only did it give out a rude response, but it was absolutely just like, wow. You know, it changes everything on it. So I mean, you know, prompt engineering itself is also important, and putting in the correct prompt engineering.
You mean I'm not a prompt engineer? What the hell?
I wouldn't even say I am.
Another mention too is, like, I remember like 3 or 4 years ago, and like they were hiring all of these prompt engineers and so forth. And I remember like OpenAI put out like a commercial ad, and they made it seem like all you have to do is just ask questions at the computer. And yeah. But in all reality, they were like hiring people to like review different prompts and output, and it's kind of like, I forget what team it's called over there at Google, where they have to review all the bad stuff, and like they have all kinds of issues. That's what they were hiring for OpenAI. So like a bunch of people were like, oh hell no, after they actually looked into it.
If you look, there was a big 60 Minutes where they summon that stuff out to third world countries so they can do all the bad stuff, because you got to tag it so they know what it was. So
somebody's got to do it.
I was gonna call it the ghetto of AI, but I thought that was too charged. So put my little banner back up. But
oh god,
I'm gonna call it the ghetto of AI. But go ahead.
As I go into the incident response. Sorry, we'll be right back. Right after PBO's rant.
So yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead, 8-bit.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, but that's kind of part of the reason why I mentioned prompt engineering is, like I said, not just the end user, interacting with the AI, but in the background, in the back end as well. Because like if you start giving it prompts and prompt engineering, like, hey, this is your role, this is how you answer questions. That's also part of controls. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, but yeah.
Yeah, and so Cat's Ninth is mentioning how Gemini rolled out a bunch of arguments saying hallucinations are definitely GRC, but that they agree with PBO that it's checking the box that they did it. It concluded AI hallucinations are a significant risk that GRC functions must address proactively. Integrating considerations for AI accuracy and reliability into governance, risk management, and compliance programs is essential for organizations leveraging AI technologies. And even if you look into like the NIST AI framework, they do have that reliability and accuracy stuff in there as well. But it all depends on your thing. That's a really good mention, Katz.
I disagree with Katz.
I'm gonna have to look that up on Gemini.
And I'm gonna write NIST AI RMF. I'm gonna write them a very stern email here after this podcast, because I disagree with them vehemently on that. But
oh gosh.
Very sternly email.
PBO is going to be so upset when he's got to work with some AI framework at work. Have you gone through that?
A little, not as much as 8, because I work for companies that do tax information and IRS Pub 1075, so they just touch on that a little bit. They don't really.
Are you saying I'm not going to have an AI to check my IRS filings and stuff anytime soon?
Oh no, don't get me wrong. I think all the tax vendors are going to put it in there for their part, but as they give it to the states and the vendors, they just take that information and upload in their system. They don't validate. If they did your taxes right. Now, if they did your taxes wrong, you will get a big fine, because you're going to be responsible for your AIs that you signed off on. But they're not going to be.
You realize now, this next year, I'm going to have to go to my CPA and be like, hey, yeah, my old friend of mine, Professor Black Ops, as he goes by. Yeah, he said I need to ask you about Pub 1075. Like, what?
He ain't going to even know what that is, man.
Probably not.
Because you got to think that's securing the computers and your information. They're just doing that stuff on PCs and they're uploading them.
So but also the IRS does have best practices and requirements for tax information requirements, though. I looked that up before. So they do, if you handle tax information, they do have requirements that you have to follow for best practices.
Pub 1075. But those are, if you look at them, those really are basic security questions. There's nothing in there. How you harden them. Then once again, a schism is just a STIG. Right, they're not. So my thing is, once again, shout out to Katz, shout out to Pressy, shout out to 8-bit. Is you talking about going and maybe I'm overthinking it. Is I'm not. That's like me telling a programmer what to do to me when you start delving in LLM. It's different if I just say make sure you do validation so you don't have a buffer overflow. That's a little different between this is a statistical analysis of a healthcare app. Like 8-bit said, and it's doing breast cancer. How the hell if I know if it's hallucinating or not? I'm not signing off on that. That could kill somebody. Now, once again, I'm not dissolving us. We're protecting it. We're making sure it get there. We're making sure they're doing an OY stop 10. We're making sure they have validation. We're making sure they have MFA. We're making sure they got, I'm old school, 15-character password with 90 special characters. We got all that in. But y'all, to me, y'all dipping, y'all towing the LMM, and I'm just, I don't know.
Do you have anything to add here, Cam?
My fault, Cam. It's your show, man.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I'm learning lots. I mean, I agree with the idea of like, you know, it will come down to like how comfortable that GRC professional is, like how far in you're willing to wade. Like if you, I think there's plenty of room for that person to just say, hey, this has to be corrected and pass it to the people, you know, the engineer side of it. So, you know, perhaps that, you know, within the structure of GRC, you have the ability to state that like these are the people, you know, in an AI policy or whatnot, like those are the things I think are important to state and to have in documentation, like who is responsible for hallucinations, who is, you know, those, I think as far as like practical steps to take as we talk about all this is like document it. If you know, if you're on PBO's camp here, as far as like it's not GRC, like make sure that is documented and stated so that you have that right course of action. That would be my biggest takeaway. If you think that, you know, just be able to communicate how those steps take place in this event, because that will be something that I think every organization faces as they implement AI into their systems. Is you will have this discussion. So the proactivity can be having it outlined in the policy.
Hey, Bid, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Are you telling the doctor how to program his LLM?
No, actually, this doctor that I'm referring to, he's actually a very smart man. He built everything out from scratch in Python. So,
You know, no disrespect to Chris, but I'm not stepping in there because if you get that wrong, that's gonna get your ass fired. But I don't know. I'm just throwing that to me. You telling people how to program it out, but maybe I'm overthinking it. Everything up to the LMM we own. I'm cool with that. But y'all talking about helping people with the LMM? I don't know about that.
A large portion of the GRC side is that consult, though, to let the developers know, like, hey, this is best practices.
That's fine.
Hey, this is risk management.
But once again, general stuff, validation, buffer overflow, OWASP top 10. To me, when you get a hallucination, you telling them how to program. Maybe I don't understand what the hell hallucination is. If it's hallucination in it, means it's programmed wrong or something's happening with the app. Now, like you said, if it's too many prompts, that's a general thing we can say, right? Clear it out or restart. But to me, y'all tipping y'all toe in the programming of an LMM and how it's built. And to me, I'm like, but once again, I'm old, man. I'll come at you.
So, like one example that I to give would be like if I prompt, like I gave an example earlier, if I ask it to give me a public speech or something like that about my organization or about a product, I don't know anything about it. I ask it to develop this, 2-paragraph thing, and it tells me lies in that paragraph, and I just copy and paste that. That would be considered a hallucination, or if it gives incorrect information and so forth.
To me, once again, that's telling the programmer what to do. That's not a GRC. If to me, that's a program giving you wrong output. That's not a GRC issue.
We're gonna have to do I don't think there's been a survey on this or much discussion.
Once again, if the data went in correctly, it was validated, we did all that stuff, and it gives me the wrong answer, that's not a me. But once again, I could be wrong. That's a programming issue.
Well, and I understand where you're coming from on it. I just look at it as once it has given the incorrect information and the user has taken that incorrect information, then that can become a risk to the organization that then becomes, a GRC issue.
To me, that for me, that's not a risk. That's a programming problem. If it gives the right answer.
But isn't a lack of sanitization a programmer problem?
Once again, I don't think it's lack of sanitation because you gave it a prompt and it gave you an answer. It thought the answer was correct, so that's not a GRC problem. But once again, I could be wrong. That's a programming problem.
No, I understand. Well, so, I think even if we do ask around and so forth, I think there's going to be a divide regardless because there's not that much discussion and so forth out there on it. So I find it kind of interesting. I think it should be defined.
Real quick, and I was wrong, and I was very adamant about this. I once said a denial of service attack wasn't a GRC issue. I said I protected it. Everything's hard and everything's good. They're not getting in. They're just sending bits and that's not me. He goes, and it was real simple. He goes, availability is part of trial. I go, damn. So I could be wrong, man. I could be wrong, like I said.
Yeah, and then also Ben Tech mentions here something we've definitely learned tonight is AI brings complex challenges, and we have a lot to learn to protect ourselves and others. I did also want to mention here too that we also learned that it's easy to wake PBO up. We just have to assign him more work. Say that he has more responsibilities to deal with.
But once again, I'm not absolving us. Once again, everything.
Oh yeah, no, I understand.
Going up to the LMM, I think we on once again the data lakes, all that stuff. Now, how you move it, and how you transform it, right? How do you train it, right? But once you get it in there, you start training it. That's a programming design type thing. Now there should be some best practices for AI, I think, to help us with that. But for me, once you get it in there, once it's validated, once my key's in there, I'm giving it to 8-bit. If 8-bit mess up the prompt, that's not on me.
I understand what you're saying.
Sorry. I mean, I think what PBO is basically trying to say is just the separation of duties. And, even when it comes to somebody that's doing GRC, most of the time, from my understanding, I'm still kind of new at that whole thing with auditing and stuff, is that they deal with audits. You usually have somebody that is, people doing GRC looks at what is best practices. They make sure everybody's following best practices. And if they don't know where a piece of data is, they go to that that department and they say, hey, are you following this? And then they'll say yes. They give evidence, and then the GRC person's role is to make sure people are following best practices as the audits go on. And when it comes to separation of duties, I'm with PBO on that. It's like if a programmer is not doing best practices, say like if they're just like storing away API keys where it's not supposed to go and not deleting them properly, you're probably going to be having PBO knocking on your door.
It's just backed up on GitHub.
GitHub actually created a program to help you find them because they were getting blamed so much. But two is, and I think, and like I said, let me step back a little bit, and I think 8-bit said it perfectly, is there's a place for that. I just don't think it's GRC. Because as a programmer, when I do a data and I test it, part of my testing is my program a hallucination. That's part of my being a developer, prompt engineer, LMM. To me, that's not a GRC. But like I said, I've been wrong before.
So let me frame this in another aspect too. So if our policy is that we have to maintain less than 5% hallucination or something along those lines is one of our things, right? As an auditor, I go through and I take 100 random samples from prompts to our employees, and I find out that 15 of those had lies in there. That I go through the prompts and the response, and I actually check to see if that information's correct, and I find out that 15 out of 100 were incorrect. Then I would push that to the development team and say, hey, this is not within the proper realms, or we use a tool to do that, or otherwise.
I don't think that policy would go to GRC. Once again, I think that would be on the development team. We had a development user test, so part of my testing would come to me. I don't think that would go to GRC, because too, if you charge a programming and your program's that far off, you're gonna get fired. So, but like you said, I can see where you think that. If I'm a GRC, I'm not taking that. I don't have the expertise to validate it. If I can't validate it, I'm not putting it on my team. Now, if I go to Windows and say these 300 things, I can scan those and come up. So you telling me you're going to give me 15% of hallucinations, but I can't test it.
You know what I think?
Go ahead,
David. No worries. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But what I think actually, when it comes down to probably a GRC role with PDO or something like that, is if the company actually puts in a policy. And I think if the company puts in a policy, then the GRC role can basically knock on the door and be like, "Hey, you're not following policy." But I still agree with you on that, PBO. Where it's like, even if it's 20% wrong or anything else, unless there's a policy put in place, or unless there's some kind of new framework that follows that, It's up to the programmers. It's up to the people, running the LLMs.
Right, like, dude,
Now-
how do I even test that? Like,
Well,
I can scan for. I can scan for stuff. Now, granted, you can run some tests, but to me, if you can do it like that, the developer's gonna test that, not GRC.
Well, and like that's a good mention. 8-bit mentions too is that if it's in the policy, but shouldn't hallucination percentages or otherwise be there?
It is. Once
In
again,
policy?
it is. Well, I don't think it's a policy. I would put it as a standard. To me,
Yeah.
a policy is overarching. So to me, that's super detailed to a department, right? When you say we're gonna secure the data, we can do encryption, we can do passwords, right? So we don't. When you start getting that detail, I don't think. But once again, I'm a curmudgeon because I worked at DoD. That's so specific. I wouldn't put that in a policy. That's either a standard or a guideline.
Well, and so the way that I would imagine it being is like, AI models must, produce, 10% or less hallucinations.
Facts.
Or have, some type of, guidelines must be in place for, best practices or reasonable metrics based on
I had those when
benchmarks.
I was a programmer. Those goes into your development unit test. I just don't think those are GRC level requirements. But because to me, once again,
it could vary too. I mean, that's I see where you're coming from.
Every company's gonna be different, and I see where you're going with it. And I do like your spunk, and I am a curmudgeon. I'm like, that's putting a lot on GRC. Most GRC teams are 4 people. For Fortune 500 companies, man. So that's a level of detail.
But now there's entire companies like Spotify running off of AI now, so it's way more of a problem. When they're laying off half of their employees and it's doing 70% of the work.
Facts, but
it's becoming much more of a piece of that pie.
And I think 8-bit and Cam brought that up is your GRC people are going to be so specialized, they're not going to be able to do work for the whole company now.
That's a really good point.
If you got them looking at 5% of a hallucination, and 8-bit to tell you, there's thousands of lines in an LMM, a little LMM, so you got them looking at each one of those outputs. Man, come on. But I don't get me wrong. There's a place for it. I just don't think it's GRC. I know. Shout out to Chris. He wants GRC to get out of the work. PBO like
after the
no.
stream, I'm going straight into our merch shop and making a T-shirt that says GRC AI GRC or something along those lines.
But
powered by PBO.
And we talked about that, Chris. Most GRC teams are small, man. So and once again, that's a unique skill set. Now, granted, I think people are gonna have like Kim. He's digging in. He's getting there. The people that's gonna have, especially in GRC, is 1%. Because let's get real. I'm gonna let Kim and 8-bit. If I got that kind of skills, I'm building LMMs and I'm getting the hell out of GRC because I can make $200,000. Motherfucker, I'm gonna stay in GRC. Chime in on that, Kim. If I got that level of skills, I'm leaving GRC.
I think it's important. Like as far as my studies go, it's to be able to know. Maybe you aren't doing the assessment or the testing of those hallucinations, but to be able to know if those reports are being gathered, whether it's by the engineer or the development team, to know what the hell you're looking at.
I'm putting you on the spot. Chris said we're looking at 5% hallucinations. He was very specific. So from Chris Gill said he wants you to be able to look at that. Chime in on that.
Well, and so the crazy part is like there was a recent independent test that was done on some of the larger AI models, and they're looking at like as high as 10 to 20% hallucinations still. And it's just that they're getting better at lying, and that's like really scary.
I'm not disagreeing with you with that number. Yeah. I'm agreeing who. The other thing I'm disagreeing is who's checking that. That's all. I just don't think it's GRC.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. PBO. PBO going to be rolling around in his grave.
Nah, we don't have the skill
20 years down the line, I'm going to be like, haha, PBO, it's GRC.
By then it'll be every kid will be running their own LML by then. But I just don't think we have the skill set or the manpower to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll see as market demand increases even further because, seeing these companies that are transitioning more and more to AI for their business needs and operation is just,
Chris, I think you've been too nice, and I'll let them too. People just putting in AI so they can sell more shit. I don't think people really doing AI correctly. They like me. I'm just gonna go on AWS, put up Amazon Bedrock, and run some stuff on their LMM with their tool and tell you I'm doing AI and charge you 40% more money.
Well, and I'm talking about like actual operations portion of it, responding to emails, customer service. We know that customer service is the biggest hit for AI so far, it seems. And like, I can't even tell you I don't talk to a real person unless I have to.
Yeah, but
I don't call my bank. I email and get an automatic response with the
I don't think that's AI because we were doing that at one of my jobs. They got prompt scripts. So if you say something in the script and it understands it, it'll send it to you. If not, it sends you something. I don't think it's doing real AI. Chime in on that, 8-bit. I don't think those things are doing AI. It's more machine learning.
Well, the thing is, what you're referring to now is when it comes to agent, not agentic AI. It's there's a new protocol for it called MCP, where instead of having, because I mean, when you're talking about PBO, is you're talking about scripting.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody gets a response, there's a script that goes ahead and does an automatic response, and it goes back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with the new thing with MCP now is it's almost like AI with scripting.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, I think it's a combination of both. Like, because with the MCP, you're right, PBO, and so is Chris, right? So the thing is, it's like there's going to be a script that's going to prompt the AI to go ahead and give a response, but then there's going to be another script probably somewhere where it tells the AI where to go next. So the AI is not making all the calls, but rather a script is making the AI tell it where to go next or what to do.
I like to be 100% right now. I'm just playing. I'm just playing. Now, to be honest, too, is I'm trying to get my AI machine learning skills up. AWS has a certification, so I've been kind of peeking at that because I'm really behind on AI, and once again, it's just I don't know, man. I just think it's gonna run wild. That's all.
Yeah, and then we are coming up to that 2-hour mark here in just a couple minutes. If you guys want to go ahead and give your last remarks, 8-bit.
No, I thought this was a great conversation. I learned a couple new things today, which was really nice. I wasn't aware of the MITRE Atlas with that. That was pretty awesome. I was looking through that, and that's going to be something to look at every once in a while now for me. But other than that, it's like I said, it's a great subject. Definitely one of those things that everybody's still learning. And as I said earlier too, when I mentioned MCP, that's still relatively new, protocol for AI, and you have a bunch of other companies still also creating new protocols on how AI can interact with other systems. So, as it grows, security is going to start being needed for it, and it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. So, I mean, yeah.
Bam. Yeah, and if you guys have any, self-hosting questions or otherwise, 8-bit over here is the local pro. He's in Discord.
Facts.
I don't know if I'm a pro, but I'm learning just like everybody else.
You and your self-hosted entire cloud service provider.
Facts.
Yeah, all right. You could be as modest as you'd like. PVO, last remarks?
Don't take this wrong. A guy told me this when I was at DOD. When I said it, he goes, "One-eyed man is king in the land of the blind." Right? It's a relative thing. But no, great conversation. Sorry, I got a little passionate about it. I want to keep GRCing, but once again, it's something I'm trying to get my hands around how to learn it. So once again, they said I'm just protecting everything why it goes into LMM. I think Chris brought up a good point: is who's responsible for that? How do you check it? Is there a framework for that? PBO said he's not touching that because you could kill somebody. But I think Chris brought up a valid point of hallucinations, or who's in charge of the quality of data that comes back out of that. Is that a company risk or a business risk? PBO says yes, it's just not GRCs. But once again, it was a great conversation. Shout out to Cam for a great talk. Like I said, I'm a MITRE guy, but I just kind of stick my toe in it. That was something new for me, understanding that technique. But once again,
what time are you going live tomorrow, PBO?
I don't know if I'm going live. I was supposed to be doing my slides, and I'm up here with you arguing.
Oh, come on, PBO.
Took out my energy. I'm gonna have to go lay down now. I ate a Big Mac. Now I'm tired of arguing with Chris. I gotta go on a damn diet. But that's another conversation. Once again, though, I appreciate the conversation. Old guy up here learning. Even though I'm passionate, I don't scare these guys, so I love these type of conversations. So.
Final remarks, Cam. Final last words.
Yeah, I love this type of discussion, and I think these things are important to try to sort out and to try to debate and to figure out, kind of where how everything shakes out. The thing I liked and the thing I wanted to bring up with this MITRE Atlas is just, like I said, kind of providing a little bit of a foundation, something we can all kind of put our feet somewhere, as we tackle this mammoth of an ever-changing technology. So appreciate everybody popping up here and all the comments, all the people following along and chiming in, and thanks for letting me share this too.
Oh, one other thing too, I wanted to sit there and say about that MITRE Atlas, which I just now found, is that there's an Atlas navigator there too. That's pretty awesome. Just like the MITRE navigator. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It's beautiful.
It is.
They make it really easy for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for presenting, Cam, and giving us that walkthrough. And then also, let me go ahead and pull this up over here. So I mentioned this earlier. If you guys want to check the database and bookmark this, it's just we're doing this regardless. But if you want to download the videos directly, the transcripts, whatever, search it all. It's definitely there. And then also PBO's channel. We've mentioned PBO before. He did share this link earlier, which is his video for NIST AI 100. And how long? 8 months ago. Man, PBO, you're going to have to redo that one soon too. There's a link for that one. He's probably going to... PBO's got such a backlog. It's not even funny. But definitely check out that one for the NIST framework. And then, of course, tomorrow, our Friday AMA at 11 a.m. Central. And then also, if you guys were not aware, there's also Thursdays at 11 for the next 4 weeks now. We're talking about this high trust. So if you check these videos here, there is a link to the different webinars. So High Trust put out a webinar series, 5-part video series about the assessment handbook that they have, the assessment guide handbook. And so what the plan is you watch the videos, you take your notes, and then we could discuss it at a further length. We had one earlier today at 11 for part 1 of 5, and that's Thursdays at 11 for the next 4 weeks now, to just do the reviews for those different videos and talk about it at a deeper level and so forth. But yeah, thank you for everybody popping in here and joining. I hope you guys grabbed your badges, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow at the AMA. GRC Mafia.